Hi, I'm Justin.
Also, I hate the way my voice sounds, so if you can do whatever Photoshop does to voices, make me sound awesome.
And this is my lovely friend,
The beauty in the eyes of the beholder, and it's just about getting into the seat of being the beholder.
Hayley.
I don't think you have to be particularly perceptive. I just think you have to look up.
This podcast is mostly just her telling me stories.
If you expose yourself to the possibility that this might be really awkward, there can be something just really cool on the other side of it.
She thinks that her life and way of looking at things are
Oh, I was kind of waiting on you. I thought you were getting your stuff ready. You're waiting on me?
pretty normal.
You got to edit out all the misinformation about the Amish.
Maybe you can relate.
I would like a chance to re-sing the Amish Paradise.
If you want lighthearted stories
All right, you want to talk about goats?
and stream of consciousness,
I just woke up and needed some friends, and so I bought them.
then you're gonna like the Sunny Side Up podcast.
Sunny side up, sunny side up, sunny side up, sunny side up.
So, if you're at all like me, you may feel that you're living in a world that can be a bit overwhelming and confusing at times. I'm also a huge fan of podcasts, documentaries, docudramas, stories, and of just information in general. Between all of that and the social media and news, sometimes our brains can feel like they're on overload. Hayley and I hope that this podcast can be something of an antidote to all of that. Like little jello shots of joy and distraction. None of it is too serious or really too informative. Mostly it's just two friends who have conversational chemistry talking about whatever enters the minds of relatively ADHD people. We hope you enjoy.
I told you we were talking about that. I did not handle very many actual divorces in court. I did a lot of paperwork for other people to file their own, but it wasn't something I typically got involved in. But one of our clients, whenever I was in practice, came to us and needed a divorce. And it is unethical to commit fraud before the court, but in this case, the court understood because what we were trying to do was get a divorce for a couple so that she could get a heart transplant. Sorry, blanked out on the word.
Yeah.
Heart transplant, super expensive, and in order to qualify for Medicaid to help pay for those anti-rejection meds and everything that she would need going forward, she needed to reduce her income and her assets to be able to qualify for state insurance to afford to stay alive.
Yeah.
What a legitimate reason.
Yeah, for sure.
So she and her husband agreed on and consulted with us on, hey, what would the asset distribution need to be? What would the property settlement agreement need to look like for her to walk away from this qualifying for Medicaid? And the judge understood that was the purpose behind it. So instead of saying this is an inequitable distribution, go back, and he was like, oh yeah, this is fine.
Yeah.
Otherwise, most judges, when they look at it, what they're looking for is this equitable? Based on your contribution to the marriage, is this not equal, but equitable? And that's where I say with your friend, splitting it unequally, it's not about being equal, but it is about being equitable.
Sure.
In this case, it wasn't equitable, but the judge understood what we were trying to accomplish, and he signed off on it. And the day that he signed off on it, the husband walked into our office and added a new girlfriend to his payroll. So he had entirely taken advantage of the situation. He was so opportunistic and just totally yanked the rug out from under his wife who was needing. Yeah, so now she needs a heart transplant for physical and
oh my God, yes,
metaphorical
spiritually,
reasons.
Emotionally.
Yeah, it was so terrible.
And she's left destitute.
And I did that. I orchestrated that. It felt terrible. It felt awful.
Yeah, I had, speaking of, kind of, not quite that dramatic though, but way back in a former life when I was a mortgage broker in Florida, I was doing, the way I was doing mortgage brokering was this little company, this little group of us that were doing it, we were focused on internet leads. So they were like the Lending Tree, Lower My Bills. I don't know if you've ever heard of those. I don't even know if they're still around anymore, but back then it was the explosion, Lending Tree and Lower My Bills. The idea was...
Were those subprime loans? Or not necessarily. It was
Oh, I was doing a lot of subprime loans, yeah. But no, what Lending Tree and Lower My Bills were doing is they were basically... The pitch is that Hayley, in her, fuzzy slippers and her muumuu, could go on.
Sounds great, by the way.
Right?
In her natural habitat.
Those old ladies were onto something, man. They're just like, that's what everybody does nowadays, except maybe slightly more stylishly than the moo-moo. But regardless, you pop on, you put in your name, some basic info, and then 3 or 4 people that were like me back then would all compete for your business.
Okay.
So you'd get like 4 Justins calling you, all saying, hey, you should use me, and here's why. And we were pitching you on how great our rates were, how fast we could close.
Oh, okay. So it wasn't just subprime loans. It was whatever.
No, it was whatever you wanted. During that
gotcha.
time, this is a side note, of course, to my point, but I was trying to be very noble. And I was like, I'm going to do 30-year fixed mortgages. And I'm going to, that's where my bread and butter was going to be. And subprimes had so penetrated the zeitgeist of the average American consumer that my first couple of months, I couldn't hardly close a loan to save my life because I was trying to pitch good mortgages and people were so not interested. They wanted ARMs. They all wanted 2 and 3 and 5 year ARMs because that's where the attractive rates were. And then at further I got into it, they wanted like the 4 option pay ARM, which one of the options was the one that you could pay that was less than the minimum amount, less than the interest payment. They wanted those loans. That's what they wanted. And if you weren't going to give it to them, you weren't going to get the business. So my happy little ass figured out after 2 or 3 months of selling no loans, and things were getting desperate because, my bosses are looking at me like, hey, dude, if we don't start selling some loans, like you got to go. And, this is an eat what you kill type of environment. I switched it up and started giving people what they wanted. And yeah, within a pretty short amount of time, I was like the number 1 mortgage broker out of like 100 and some, 200 some. I don't remember how many were total in the Access e-mortgage world, but yeah. Anyways, good times were had by all on that. But any which way, so this one particular call that relates to what you just said in terms of kind of like questionable dudes. This guy worked for a Fortune 500 company. I don't remember which company anymore, but he was an executive, I don't remember, mid-level executive, making, I think, like $375,000 a year, somewhere in that range. So decent money.
Yeah.
Not like mind-blowing, like, oh, he's making $10 million a year, but like good money.
You could live off that.
Absolutely. Would love to live off that. And I wish I could remember his approach, but he let it be known up front. Yes, he wanted a good rate. Yes, he wanted good closing time and all that stuff, but the most important thing to him, which that's what normally people want, is like what's your rate? How quickly can you close? Things like that, right? What he wanted was he wanted to be absolutely sure that we would handle his loan delicately because what he was doing was he was a married man buying a house for his mistress. Right. And, of course, we had to use his real address to pull his credit, which is the place where his wife resided. And normally you send all your disclosures and like everything just goes to the main address. But if any disclosures, if anything got through, what was going to happen was, and he told me this, he's like, I'll end up getting divorced and I'm going to sue you guys because you end up causing a divorce. Because if she doesn't know, she'll be happy. And he's like, anyways, he had this whole thing worked out how he's going to, buy this mistress a house. And I was like, yeah, we can make that happen. Because I knew like our little circle was tight. And so I just made sure, I was like, guys, like, look me in the eye. Got this? This is what this dude's doing. We absolutely, under no circumstances, can send any of his disclosures to his main address. It has to go to this other address, whatever we had worked out. And we executed brilliantly. We managed to help this dude buy his mistress a house and never disrupted his marital bliss with his other with his main squeeze. So proud moment.
Right. I can see you are almost as distressed as I was whenever I helped break up the marriage where the mistress was
helped keep it together. That's what I'm trying to say, Hayley. There's a difference between me and you. You are actively trying.
I split them up and helped split them up.
Yes.
You
and I'm just like, what can I do to keep
save the marriage?
See, I'm all about
Not all heroes wear capes.
Not all heroes wear capes. Speaking of heroes, though, I got to tell you a story, and this may be our last story we can record for tonight. Do you have any more like chambered stories? Because I got a great one to end on.
There's like few, but nothing particularly like pressing or interesting. It was just little.
You sure?
Yeah. Well, odds and ends. Like the time that Katie went for, she was a kid, and I took her to get her hair cut, and the girl cut half of her hair, and then said, "I'm too tired to finish.
No,
you have to take her home and come back another day."
That's not a real story.
Oh yeah, is it? I'm not. It feels like it's not even interesting anymore because it was so long ago, and it just feels like a part of my history. That time I took my kid and got a half a haircut, and I was so stunned when she said it. I was like, okay, all right. And so my child with half, and I'm talking about like half of her head. It wasn't like a thing that you could really work with. The lady just totally stopped and I was like, okay. And then I paid for a whole haircut.
Oh, yeah.
And left a tip because I'd already kind of calculated in my head, and I don't dare do mental math on the spot. So here's the full payment plus tip.
Oh, my God.
And I'd take my little cute kid with her half a haircut out and get home. And that was the night that I learned that I could make a haircut. I finished it, and it really was cute.
Wait, you didn't bring it back and make this lady finish her
Would
business?
you take your kid back to a lady who gave you a half a haircut?
I think I would on principle, especially if I paid her for the whole dang thing. Heck yeah.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I guess
non-confrontational.
Fool me once. I'm not
Sure.
going.
Yeah.
Like,
you'll just never get my
but
business
definitely
again.
non-confrontational.
Yeah, but also that. Yeah.
But as evidenced by me paying full price. But no, I just was like, oh, she didn't do it right the first time. I'm not returning for more of that. But
I wonder, like,
it was a little Posh Spice haircut, lightly stacked in the back so that it wouldn't tangle during the night, and I wouldn't have to pull out tangles whenever I brush them. It was so cute.
I'll bet. And Katie's just such a cute, precious little human being. I wonder, like, what other professions could you go halfway through? Like, I know we talked about plumbers earlier. I brought up plumbers. Like, your pipe burst and you called the plumber and he's like, I'm going to come fix half the pipe, but then I'm tired, so I'll come back another day. The yard man, I guess he could cut like half the yard.
Oh, that has happened. That's happened so many times.
Yeah.
I can't even tell you.
Yeah.
Like, yard men stop halfway through all the time.
A surgeon, like
would
halfway through the
prefer
heart.
that not happen, but
Right.
I mean, that first heart surgery was like 24 hours. I could totally imagine that where they were transplanting something. There's a photo of a guy, the surgeon sitting there, and he had just performed a 24-hour some sort of. Maybe it was the first heart transplant or
First heart transplant ever in human history. Heart transplant,
possibly like there was an age-defying, like era-defining reason for this surgery, and the surgeon is just exhausted, and it's a photo of him sitting down next to the surgical table after this 24-hour. You haven't seen that photo? It's just one of those.
No.
It's like all the guys sitting on the little beam at the
Yes.
top of the high. It was one of those type photos that just kind of like circle. Yes.
Yeah, I missed that one.
I'll tell you what. It's part of a post that I've seen so many times of like greatest photos, and that was one of them.
Half your toenails painted. I'm tired. I'm going to leave. Come back tomorrow.
That would work because it's covered up by sock, so it could actually like at least then it's not like fighting mad that it has happened. But ain't nobody cooking your food halfway and quitting.
That's what I'm saying.
Like
Who gets it? Like, this is insanity.
I just shouldn't have paid for it, and the story would have at least made a little bit more sense.
Yeah.
But when I paid for the whole thing, that's where this was ridiculous. So it wasn't even her fault. It was my fault. I'm the ridiculous one in that scenario.
Yes, I agree.
It was me.
Because like my first like real podcast like obsession, like what got me into loving podcasts, I probably said this before, was Adam Carolla. And he had this theory that crazy people are just crazy people, right? There's a percentage of the population, they just are. Like, and you can't be mad at them. That's just how it is.
Adrenal dysfunctions.
So the people you have to hold responsible are the people around them. So start with the basics of like, the guy who wanders out of his home and like, his he's wearing mismatched clothes or whatever it is. Like, if he has a wife, like, that's on her. Like, he's a crazy person. He's like, whatever. Anyways, that was sort of the idea. So, yeah, I have to hold you responsible, I think, in this situation.
For enabling?
Yeah. Like, because clearly something's not right with her, but you paying her the full amount is like, oh, yeah, this is wonderful behavior. You should continue on.
Yes.
Tough.
Yes.
Hello, lovely friends. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. And it would mean the world if you would tell other people about this podcast and maybe even spam your social media accounts with just how much you're enjoying it. If you are, of course. Also, commenting and rating us on whatever platform you're downloading or streaming from is incredibly helpful to a little startup podcast like this one. On the other hand, if you are dissatisfied with your listening experience, please leave all of that hate on someone else's podcast. Just maybe to confuse them a little bit, right? But most of all, we hope you keep looking up and looking for the sunny side of life.